Have you ever heard a phone ring when it shouldn't? Not a mistake, not a glitch, not the echo of your own thoughts in a silent room. I mean a real, deliberate ring. One that doesn't just reach your ears but grips your mind, claws at your spine, and makes the air feel just a little heavier. That's how it began for Micah, a man who didn't believe in ghosts, or at least he thought he didn't. The kind of man who walked past cemeteries without a second glance, who laughed at horror movies and rolled his eyes at every story that began with, "You won't believe what happened to me." He was analytical, practical, alone. Micah had recently moved to a forgotten stretch of countryside called Wellsbrook Hollow, a place that didn't even exist on most digital maps. It was a detour town, something you only stumbled upon by accident or perhaps by design. He had come looking for silence, escape, a place where the city noise and that one memory couldn't follow him. The house he bought was cheap, suspiciously cheap. A two-story brick skeleton flanked by blackened trees and an overgrown yard that seemed to lean inward like it was trying to whisper secrets. But he didn't care. He just wanted peace. The kind of peace where no one called. And for weeks, that's what he had. No signal, no interruptions, just the wind dragging its nails across the window panes and the occasional groan of wood trying to remember what it felt like to be lived in. Until that night. It was around 2:14 a.m. when it happened. That unmistakable trill, sharp and shrill, slicing the silence like a scalpel. A phone was ringing, but not his cell phone. That had no reception, and he hadn't even unpacked the charger. This ring was old, mechanical. It had that clanging metallic tone that made you think of dusty attics and things wrapped in yellowed cloth. Micah froze in bed. He thought at first it was a dream, the kind that lures you in with a sound that shouldn't be there. But the ring came again, and again, 3 times, steady, rhythmic, then silence. He got out of bed slowly, heart thudding like footsteps in an empty hall. He followed the sound even though it was gone, relying only on some pull in the air, some gravitational thread dragging him downward into the dark hallway, past the creaking stairs, into the first floor. The ringing didn't return, but something else did. A coldness. Not like a breeze. It didn't move. It just was. Like he'd stepped through an invisible wall of temperature, and on the other side, the world no longer made sense. His feet stopped in front of the basement door. It was cracked open. He didn't remember leaving it that way. Micah stood there for a moment, hand hovering near the wood, breath shallow. The air seeping through the crack smelled like rusted iron and damp earth. It was too cold, unnaturally cold, as if the basement had been sealed from time and warmth for decades. He pushed the door open slowly. Each creak of the hinges felt like a scream held back too long. The stairs beneath were steep, wooden, and worn in the middle, curved ever so slightly by the weight of past footsteps. He descended them, one step at a time, trying not to think about the fact that he hadn't even known this house had a basement when he bought it. It hadn't been in the listing. No one mentioned it. Yet here it was. And at the bottom, in the deepest part of the house, where the light bulb flickered like a dying thought, was a small wooden table. Sitting neatly atop it, an old rotary phone, black, heavy, silent. Micah stared at it. There was no cord connecting it to anything. No wires. No sign that it had ever been plugged into the wall. It was just there, like a relic buried in the earth that had unearthed itself to be seen again. He approached slowly, unsure why his hands were trembling. The phone was covered in dust, thick layers, undisturbed. He hadn't touched it, and yet it had rung, didn't it? Micah reached out, fingers grazing the handset. It was warm, not just room temperature, but like it had been held recently. Like a hand, maybe human, maybe not, had gripped it only moments before he arrived. A chill traced his spine. Suddenly, a sound cracked through the silence, a soft creaking, distant, upstairs. He jerked around, nothing, just shadows and silence in that flickering bulb, now dimmer than before. He looked back to the phone. A thought pressed against the edges of his mind, heavy, persistent. Pick it up. He didn't know where it came from, whether it was memory, instinct, or something else whispering between his thoughts, but it felt inevitable. So he did. He lifted the receiver slowly, carefully, as though afraid it might burn him. He pressed it to his ear, at first only silence. Then after a few seconds came the softest sound, like a distant wind blowing through dead leaves. Then static. Then breathing. Shallow, wet, like lungs not meant to function anymore. Then a voice that made Micah's knees buckle just slightly. It whispered one word, his name. Micah. And the line went dead. Micah didn't move. The receiver was still pressed to his ear, but the voice was gone. Only the sound of his own pulse, deafening, chaotic, throbbed behind his eyes. He slowly lowered the phone, set it back in its cradle. It clicked with a sharp finality, like the lid of a coffin snapping shut. That voice. It wasn't just familiar. It wasn't just human. It was impossible. Micah had heard that voice before, not in a dream, not in a memory, in real life. It belonged to Callan Royce, a man who had been dead for over 4 years. A man who'd vanished without a trace. A man Micah had known, had trusted, had buried. In every way someone could bury the past. He staggered backward from the table, breath short, eyes fixed on the phone as though it might move on its own. But nothing did. The silence returned like a thick, wet cloth around his head. Too heavy, too tight. He climbed the stairs in a daze, pushing the basement door shut behind him with more force than necessary. The sound echoed through the hollow house, bouncing off the empty walls like a warning. He should have left it at that. Should have walked away, ignored the voice, chalked it up to stress, to a dream, to something explainable. But he didn't. Because the next morning the phone rang again, this time at exactly 2:14 a.m. And the night after that, same time, same number of rings, same silence when he arrived. By the 5th night he started waiting in the basement, just standing there in the dark, staring at the phone before it even rang, already holding the receiver before the sound began. It became a ritual, until the 6th night. That night, the voice said something else, not just his name, something longer, something colder, something meant for him. Micah never told anyone what the voice said, but he began to change after that. He boarded up the windows, he unplugged every electrical device, he stopped going outside, he stopped sleeping. Neighbors, the few that lived in the surrounding miles of the hollow, noticed his lights never turned on anymore. Until one morning they rang his doorbell, and it rang, and rang. But no one answered. Just beyond the hallway, down the cracked stairs, in the cold basement, the phone rang again, and this time, someone else answered. was something wrong with the air. Micah sat at the edge of his bed, eyes sunken into the dark, staring at nothing while the red digits of the clock burned quietly. 2:12 a.m. He was waiting for the ring. He didn't know why or when this became normal, but he no longer slept, no longer ate right. Time didn't feel like something that passed, just something he stared at, until 2:14 arrived, and the phone rang. When it did, there was no shock, no fear, only a sick comfort, like a broken ritual that somehow kept him sane. He stood up without a word. The house was dead silent. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. He moved down the stairs, slowly. He didn't need light anymore. His feet knew the way. His chest knew the dread. His skin remembered the cold. The basement door was already open, waiting for him. Another ring, then silence. The black phone was still there, in the center of the table, innocent in appearance, but Micah could feel it. It wanted to be held. He reached for it, lifted the receiver. Silence. Not true silence, the kind with a presence behind it, as if someone was there, breathing, slowly, deliberately. And then a voice, soft, cracked, almost gentle. "Are you alone tonight?" Micah didn't respond at first. The question wasn't threatening. It was simple, calm. But there was something unnatural about the way it was asked. Like the voice wasn't using words, but echoing them from somewhere deeper, somewhere colder. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The voice spoke again. "Are you alone?" This time slower, as if it already knew the answers but wanted to hear him say it. Micah swallowed. "Yes," he whispered. A pause. Then the line crackled. Faint static, almost like wind whispering across bones. "Good." That single word felt like a switch being pulled somewhere far beneath the floorboards, as if something had been waiting for that permission. Micah's grip on the receiver tightened. "Who is this?" he asked, finally finding his voice. No answer, only breathing, wet, close. Then a sound, faint but unmistakable. Footsteps, not over the phone, from upstairs. He turned, the receiver still in his hand, staring up the staircase that led back into the house. The basement lights flickered. One of them buzzed, then went out completely. "Hello?" he said, backing away from the table. He didn't know which was worse, the voice on the line, or the possibility that someone was now in his house. But the voice returned, quiet and composed. "You shouldn't have answered." Click. The line went dead. Micah stood there, frozen, the dead receiver still pressed against his ear like it might speak again. But it didn't. All that remained was the silence and the creaking above him. He placed the phone back in its cradle slowly, almost reverently, as though it were something sacred or cursed. Then he moved toward the stairs, each footstep deliberate, cautious, nearly soundless. Halfway up, he paused. There was a shift in the air, something subtle, but real. A pressure, as if the house itself had inhaled and was holding its breath. At the top of the stairs, he hesitated again. The living room was dimly lit by the glow of the kitchen nightlight. Everything looked the same, but it felt wrong, off balance. Like he had walked back into a place pretending to be his home. Then he heard it. Not footsteps, breathing, somewhere in the hallway, slow, steady, and not his. He turned the corner. No one. The hallway was empty, but the bedroom door, the one he'd left open, was now shut. Micah's heart knocked against his ribs. He approached slowly, barely daring to breathe himself. His hand reached the doorknob. Cold. Too cold. He turned it, pushed the door open. Nothing. The room was empty, but the window was wide open, curtains moving like soft fingers in the breeze. And there, on the bed, sat something he hadn't seen in years. A small black tape recorder, old, dusty, and already playing. He stepped closer, the sound barely audible. The voice that spoke was his own. "Are you alone tonight?" Micah stepped back, hard, but the door behind him had already swung shut and clicked, locked. Micah lunged for the doorknob. It didn't move. He twisted harder, pulled. Nothing. The sound of his own voice continued playing on the recorder, looping the same question over and over. "Are you alone tonight? Are you alone tonight? Are you alone?" Each repetition scraped at his nerves like rusted nails dragging along glass. He slammed his palm against the door, then again. Nothing answered. No sound came from the other side, just the recorder, still playing, still him. He moved toward it, hand trembling. When he touched it, the tape stopped, mid-sentence. No click, no rewind, no mechanical noise at all, just silence. And then his own voice returned, but this time not from the tape, from the hallway. Micah spun around, but the room had no one, still sealed, still cold. And now something was different. The walls seemed closer, the shadows heavier, and the night outside had turned completely still. Even the breeze through the open window had stopped. He backed away from the recorder as if it might bite. But before he could turn, a sound erupted from under the bed. Not scratching, not movement, breathing, shallow, labored, too close. Micah froze. Something was under there. He crouched down slowly, inch by inch, eyes narrowing into the darkness beneath the bed frame. At first, there was nothing, just shadows and old floorboards. Then, movement, a hand, not reaching out, just there, pale, still, waiting, attached to something, someone, curled up beneath the bed like a memory too old to be real. He stared, unable to breathe, unable to move. Then the fingers twitched, once, and the voice whispered softly, "You invited me." Micah stumbled backward, his spine slamming against the far wall. The bed didn't move. The hand didn't reach. It simply lay there, pale, motionless, almost peaceful, but the voice still echoed in his skull. "You invited me." He didn't remember saying yes. He didn't remember saying anything at all. And yet, the voice sounded sure. The silence that followed was unnatural, thick, heavy. It pressed against his lungs like the air itself didn't want to be breathed anymore. He reached for the door again, still locked. Then, suddenly, the lights cut out, all of them. The recorder, the hallway, even the dim nightglow from outside vanished, as though someone had pulled the sky shut. Micah stood in perfect darkness. No phone, no sound, no escape. Only the knowledge that something else was in the room with him. He felt it. A presence, not just near him, but around him. Like something had seeped from the corners of the walls, crawling beneath his skin. Then he heard it again, but not from under the bed. From behind him, a voice. Familiar. Software. Micah. He turned, slow as breath. Still nothing. Just pitch black. But he knew what he felt. The air had changed, and then the phone rang. Not his cell. The basement phone. Micah could hear it through the floorboards. Ringing. 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 The voice behind him whispered again, "Don't answer this time." But Micah had already started moving. Each step Micah took down the hallway felt like it echoed in a space far larger than the house around him, like the walls were stretching, breathing. The lights remained dead. Only the ringing guided him now, sharp and deliberate, pulsing from somewhere deep below. Down the stairs, across the living room, to the basement door. It stood open again. Of course it did. He didn't hesitate this time. He was too far in, too far from logic, too far from safety. The air thickened with every step down. The phone's ring grew louder, but not in volume, in weight, as though it were pressing itself into his skull, shaping his thoughts to its rhythm. Ring, ring, ring. He reached the bottom. The same table, the same black rotary phone, except now there was something new, something he hadn't seen before. A piece of paper, folded neatly beneath the handset. Micah stared at it, then reached. Slowly. The paper was dry, yet smelled of earth and age. He unfolded it. One sentence, written in smeared black ink. You said yes. He dropped it. It fluttered to the ground without a sound. The phone stopped ringing. Silence again. Then, click. It picked up by itself. Micah staggered back, breath caught in his throat. From the receiver came a sound, not a voice. A heartbeat, steady, strong, but not his. Then a whisper beneath the pulse. He's almost here. Micah stared at the phone like it had grown eyes. The heartbeat continued, slow, calm, alien. It wasn't a sound meant to be heard from a speaker. It was something you feel in your bones, like it didn't travel through your ears but straight into the center of your chest. Thump, thump. Micah backed away, step by trembling step. The phone didn't hang up. It pulsed, as if it was alive. Then, something shifted. From behind him, in the darkest corner of the basement, came a whisper. You left the door open. Micah spun, heart pounding. Nothing, just concrete, shadow, and dust. But the temperature dropped again, sudden and unnatural, the kind of cold that didn't belong to weather. He moved toward the stairs. He had to get out. This wasn't curiosity anymore. It was survival. But as he turned to climb, he stopped. Footprints on the basement floor, wet, fresh, leading up the stairs, like something had already left the basement before him. And beside those prints, something else. Smaller, bare, like a second set had followed close behind, without shoes, without sound, without permission. Micah's eyes followed the trail until it disappeared beyond the door. And then, from upstairs, a knock. Just one. Not on the front door, on his bedroom door, the same one that had locked itself hours ago. The phone spoke again, soft, barely audible. You should have never let him in. Micah didn't remember letting anyone in. He didn't remember unlocking a door, didn't recall hearing footsteps. And yet, someone, something, was moving freely through his house now. His legs trembled, but he forced himself up the stairs. Each step creaked like it was warning him, or mourning him. The hallway was darker than it had any right to be. His bedroom door was closed again, but the air outside it, still, cold, wrong. He approached it slowly. The knock hadn't come again, but the silence behind that door wasn't empty. It was expectant, like whatever was on the other side was waiting, listening. He reached for the knob, stopped. Something was written on it, scratched in with something sharp, almost desperate. Don't answer. His throat tightened. Not because of fear, he was already far past fear, but because deep down he recognized the handwriting. It was his. Micah stared at the words, heart racing. He didn't remember writing them, but some part of him, some buried screaming part, believed he did. And then the knob turned on its own, slowly, quietly. From the other side, Micah stepped back, One step, then another. The door didn't open, it just stopped turning, as if whoever or whatever was inside had changed its mind. Then, a voice muffled behind the wood. "Micah!" This time, not a whisper, a call, a command. He turned and ran. Micah didn't stop to think. He just ran. Down the hallway, past the half-dead light bulbs, past the photos on the walls that no longer looked familiar. Something had shifted in the house. It wasn't just haunted. It was watching him. The floors felt longer, the corners sharper, like the layout of his home had quietly rewritten itself when he wasn't looking. He reached the kitchen and stopped, chest heaving, fingers gripping the counter edge. He needed to get out of the house, out of the invitation he never meant to give. His hand reached for the back door, fumbling at the lock. Click. Already unlocked. He froze. That door was always locked, always. He turned the handle slowly and pulled it open. A gust of wind hit him, cold, but not outside air. It smelled like soil, like something recently disturbed, and then he saw it. In the middle of his backyard, a phone, the same black rotary phone, just sitting there in the grass, upright as if placed intentionally. It wasn't plugged into anything, it wasn't attached to the house. Yet, as he stared at it, it rang. One single, loud, shattering ring. Micah stepped outside, barefoot in the wet grass. Each step felt colder than the last. The wind around him seemed to circle. And when he reached the phone, he noticed something carved into the dirt beside it. A symbol, circular, sharp, etched like it had been burned into the ground. And beneath it, words scratched in shaky lettering. He's not on the line anymore. He's in the house. Micah stood over the phone, the words in the dirt echoing louder than the ring ever could. He's not on the line anymore. He's in the house. His skin turned to ice. He looked back toward the house. The back door stood wide open, darkness spilling out like ink. The wind was gone. No sound, no rustle. Just a dead stillness that wrapped around everything like a vacuum. Even the trees seemed to hold still, as if they too were listening. The phone rang again. Micah stared at it. He didn't want to answer, but he did. His fingers gripped the receiver, cold and wet with dew. He brought it to his ear. At first, nothing. Then, scratching, like nails over a wooden surface. Then a distant voice, not whispering this time, speaking clearly. "He knows you." Micah's mouth was dry. He forced out a question. "Who is he?" Silence. Then the voice answered, but it wasn't the same voice as before. This one was deeper, older. It felt like it didn't come from the phone, but from somewhere behind his head. He was buried with secrets. You dug them up. Micah dropped the phone. It didn't stop ringing. The sound kept going, through the receiver, through the grass, through the ground itself. He turned back toward the house. A light was on upstairs, his bedroom, and standing in the window, a silhouette. Still watching, not moving, not breathing, just waiting. Micah couldn't look away. The silhouette in the window was perfectly still. It wasn't curious. It wasn't hiding. It stood like it belonged there, like it had always belonged. A part of the house that had simply been asleep. Until now. The light in the room behind it flickered once, then again. On the third flicker, the silhouette was gone. Micah stepped backward into the yard. The grass felt colder, wetter, like it had been soaking in something deeper than rain. He didn't remember inviting anything, didn't remember digging up anything, but now everything around him felt like the echo of a decision he couldn't remember making. Behind him, the phone rang again. He didn't turn around. He stepped forward, toward the house. Not by choice, by pull. As if something inside was drawing him back. The back door was still open, the kitchen beyond it, motionless. But as he crossed the threshold, the sound returned. Whispers everywhere, from the walls, from the pipes, from inside the floor, not words, not sentences, just presence. He moved slowly through the kitchen. Each shadow along the walls looked deeper than it should. Like if he stared too long, something might look back. He reached the bottom of the stairs, looked up. At the top step, a trail of dirt, footprints, small, bare and wet, leading into the hall, and beside them smeared across the wood. A handprint, too large to be human, and still wet. Micah's foot hovered above the first step. His breath caught. The dirt trail looked fresh, like whoever left it had walked through the house just moments ago. But there were no sounds, no doors creaking, only silence. He placed his foot down. The step groaned under his weight. He ascended slowly. Each stair creaked, not from his movement, but as if reacting, wincing at his presence. When he reached the top, the hallway felt longer, stretched. The floor beneath his feet had warped. The walls leaned in, and at the far end, his bedroom door was open again. Micah followed the trail of prints. His own walls looked different in the dark. Family photos had turned in their frames, facing the wall. A mirror was cracked, though he didn't remember breaking it. And in one spot, just before his room, he saw something that stopped him. A piece of paper, folded, torn from a journal. He knelt and picked it up. 3 words written in faded red ink. He wears faces. Micah stared. The handwriting wasn't his, but he'd seen it before, years ago, in a notebook buried with someone who should have never been found. The hallway dimmed around him, his room just a few steps away, and then, from inside that room, a whisper, "I remember your voice." Micah didn't want to move. His muscles tensed, rooted to the hallway floor. The voice from inside the room was gentle, familiar, but wrong, like it had borrowed something soft to hide something sharp. He stared at the open door. The trail of prints led straight inside, but now they were smudged, as if something had crawled instead of walked. He stepped forward. The light in the room flickered again, but didn't go out. It stayed dim, like a dying memory trying to stay lit. He stood in the doorway, breath shallow. The room was empty, bed untouched, curtains still. But on the far wall, above the dresser mirror, something new. Dozens of pieces of paper pinned and torn and taped. Some looked old, almost decayed. Others were fresh. Each one held a face, drawn, photographed, sketched in graphite and coal. Dozens of them, eyes scratched out, mouths erased. Some marked with numbers, some marked with names. At the center of them all, a face Micah knew too well. His own, marked with a circle, red, fresh. Micah stumbled back, heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped thing. He turned, ready to run, and came face to face with himself, standing in the hallway. Same face, same body, same shirt. But the eyes, empty, not blind, not black, just absent. The thing that wore his face smiled, just slightly, and said, "I remember everything you forgot." Micah staggered back into the room, breath ragged, hands shaking. The thing in the hallway didn't follow. It didn't need to. It just stood there, wearing him like memory, like mockery. Micah's back hit the dresser. Papers fluttered from the wall, faces drifting to the floor like leaves from a dead tree. His own reflection stared at him from the mirror, except it wasn't moving. Micah turned his head. His reflection didn't. It stood, smiling slightly, eyes narrowed, not mirroring him, but watching. Then it blinked. Micah didn't. He turned away. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. The room darkened slowly, like the air was pulling the light from the walls. He backed toward the door, but the other Micah was gone. The hallway was empty. He stepped out, looking both ways. No one. But on the wall near the floor, drawn in black, dripping lines, was a symbol. The same one from the dirt in his yard. Circle, jagged, pierced by vertical lines. Below it written in a childlike scrawl, "You invited him into your reflection." Micah stumbled toward the bathroom. He had to see, had to be sure. He flicked on the light, looked in the mirror, and stared at the face, staring back. Same skin, same eyes, but a smile that wasn't his. And then the reflection moved before he did. Micah froze. His reflection shouldn't have moved, not first, not like that, but it did. It tilted its head slowly, studying him with a smile too thin, too precise, like it had been practiced, not lived. Micah raised his hand. The reflection didn't. It simply stood there, watching. Then it spoke, but not aloud. Its mouth moved. His ears heard nothing, yet the words echoed in his mind like thoughts that weren't his. "You don't belong here anymore." Micah stumbled back, slamming into the doorframe. The mirror cracked, spiderweb lines darting out from the center of the glass, splitting his face into fragments. And in each fractured shard, he saw something different. Different eyes, different versions. Some of them screaming, some of them dead, some of them smiling. He turned away, heart hammering. The bathroom light flickered, then went out completely. He ran down the hall, past the photos with blank faces, down the stairs that creaked like they knew what was coming. He made it to the front door, unlocked it, swung it wide, but there was nothing outside. No porch, no lawn, just darkness, not night, just nothing. A void where the world should be. He stepped back, and from behind him the phone rang. Micah didn't want to turn around. The ring echoed through the house, not like sound, but like a thought that refused to leave. It vibrated in his teeth and the bones behind his eyes, not the rotary phone. This was different, closer. He turned slowly. The sound wasn't coming from the basement, it was coming from upstairs. He climbed the staircase again, legs heavy, breath tight. The hallway was darker than before. The walls pulsed, subtle like lungs beneath wallpaper. Every step he took sounded distant, like he was walking through someone else's dream. The ringing led him to the guest room, a door he hadn't opened since moving in. He turned the knob. It wasn't locked. He pushed it open. The room was empty, bare, except for a small wooden chair in the center, and on it, a mirror. Not mounted, not hanging, just standing there, tall and ancient, wrapped in thick black cord. But the mirror was ringing. From inside the glass, behind the surface, a phone was vibrating. He stepped closer. The reflection showed the room behind him, plain, silent. But when he looked at the mirror directly, he wasn't in it. No reflection, just the chair, the room, and the phone, still ringing inside. Then slowly something stepped into view within the mirror. Him, Micah, but not quite. The other version of him looked tired, drained, stained with something dark and dry. It raised a finger, pointed at him through the glass, and mouthed 3 words. "Let me out." Micah staggered back from the mirror. The other him, The version that wasn't supposed to exist just stood there inside the glass, unmoving now, hand still raised. The ringing had stopped, but something else had started. A hum, low, constant, not from the room, from the mirror itself, like it was vibrating with something alive. Micah couldn't look away. The reflection leaned forward, slow, deliberate, face hovering just behind the surface, eyes locked onto his. And then it smiled. But this time the smile was wide, wrong. Not a copy of his expression, but something wearing it, stretching it too far. Micah reached out without thinking. Fingertips brushed cold glass, and for a split second, it felt like skin. He ripped his hand back. The mirror rippled, like water. Something moved behind the reflection. Shadows, shapes, others. How many versions of him were in there? How many had touched the glass? How many had said yes? Then he saw something horrifying, carved into the inside of the mirror's frame on the glass itself. Scratches, dozens, all the same word, over and over. Remember. He stepped away. The hum grew louder. The version of him inside the glass opened its mouth, and from it came a voice, not his own. You've been on the wrong side this whole time.